Hello and welcome back. With our chat application well on its way, our server can start up, our clients can join, and we can actually have a really pretty cool chat going on. Let's work on adding some of our admin functionality to our server. So if I head over to my server, and I'll just run the server so we see it. There's lots of things that the admin should be able to do. The admin should be able to broadcast to everybody in the chat a specific message that they want. They should be able to send a private message if they select someone from within the chat. They should be able to kick someone from within the chat if they select them, and then they should be able to ban someone from the chat if they select them. So in this video, we'll start looking at some of that functionality right here. Let's start with the self broadcast function. I mean, it's pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward. What we'll do is we're going to create a message packet, and then we'll turn it into a JSON. We'll encode it, and then we'll just send it off to be broadcast. So if we look here under the self broadcast function on the server file, we'll say create a message packet. All right, and so we'll say message packet is equal to, we have a function that creates these for us. It's called create message. And inside of here, we need a few things. We need a flag. So this flag will be a message flag. It's just a typical message. We need who it's from. So we'll say admin, and we'll let them know that this is a broadcast message. We need the message itself. So where are we going to get the message from? Well, I believe we have an entry box. It's called input entry. If we come down here to our admin frame, or a message frame, here we go. We have input entry, so we can get the text right from this entry. So we'll say input entry.get. And then we need a color, and we'll just specify our admin color as light green. We have it defined here in our layout. All right, wonderful. So now that we have this message packet, that's the dictionary. If we want to send it through our socket, we got to encode it, and so we got to turn it into a string first. So we'll say message JSON is equal to json.dumps, and we'll dump the message packet. All right, now that that is there as a string, let's send it to the broadcast message function. So we'll broadcast our own personal message, broadcast message. And in here, broadcast message takes two things. It takes a connection object. So there's our connection. And it takes the message. So we'll say message JSON, and we got to make sure we encode it first. That's how I wrote this. So we'll encode everything before we broadcast. So I'll say encode, and our encoder will get through our connection object. So connection.encoder. And the last thing we'll do here is we will clear out the input entry once we send it, so I don't have to manually, remove that text. So I'll say clear the input entry. Input entry dot delete, starting at the beginning and going all the way to the end. All right, and so there is that method, or that function. Should work out really nicely. Next, let's just scroll down. Let's work on the private message function. Here, it's a little bit more involved. So here, if we want to send a private message, we actually have to select the client from our list box that we want to send the message to. And we have to do that because we have to get access to that specific client socket, right? We don't want to send a message to every single socket that is in our sockets list. We just want to send it to one specific one. But luckily, we have a list of all of our client sockets attached to our connection object. And, that is going to really help us out. So the index in our list is going to be the same index within our list box. So it should work out kind of nicely. So let's see how we are going to do this. So the first thing that we have to do, we'll say select the client from the client list box and access their client socket. So we're going to get an index. So we'll say index is equal to, and we're going to get the index from our list box, right? So if I have my list box, I'm going to click one of my client's names. I need to get the index of that client within the list box. So client list box dot. In order to do that, we're going to call the cur selection. So cur selection method. And here we have to specify what value we want. So we want the first item within that, which is going to give us the index. All right, so the first item, index 0, is going to give you the index of the item selected when you do this. Then once we have that index, we are going to get the actual client socket. So to get the actual client socket, we're going to go to our connection object. We're going to go to the client socket lists that we have. So we have that list client sockets, right? It's defined. We defined it all the way up here, and every time someone joins, we add it to that list. And we're just going to access the client socket that is at the specified index that we got from our list box. So we'll put our square brackets here and we'll say index. Now we have access to the individual client socket. And so that's going to be super helpful for us. So we can maybe create a message packet. So we'll say create a message packet and send. All right, so we'll create a message packet. Message packet is equal to the create message function that we wrote. And in here, we'll give a flag. We'll say message flag, so it's processed correctly. Who sent it? It's the admin, but this time I'll say it is a private message. The message that we want to actually send, we're going to get from our input entry, so input entry.get, and then our color will just be our default light green for the layout we have. Okay, so there's our message packet. Let's turn it into a JSON. So I'll say message JSON is equal to json.dumps, and we'll dump the message packet. And now I am going to send it directly to this individual client socket that I have selected. So if I scroll down or put my cursor back here, I'll say client socket.send message json.encode. Got to make sure I encode that string, and we'll get the encoder through our connection object. So connection.encoder. And then lastly, let's clear the input entry so I don't have to manually delete this. Clear the input entry. All right, so this is going to be input entry.delete, starting at index 0 and going all the way to the end. Okay, so before I can test, I think, these two functions of broadcasting on the admin and then sending a private message, I have to link my buttons. So I have to do this because, let's see, both of them require a connection object. I'm going to link the buttons through a lambda function. So if I scroll down, I've got my, under the message frame layout, I have my self broadcast button. So I'm going to scroll over and I'm going to say command is equal to lambda colon, and now that function is called self broadcast, self underscore broadcast, and now I can send in the connection. All right, perfect. And let's do something similar to the private message button. So where's my private message button? Oh, we're calling it message button. Here we go. Message button in my admin frame. So right here, I'm going to say command is equal to lambda colon, and we'll call our private message function. But now I can pass in my argument here of my connection. Did I pass in my connection, or did I just pass connection up here? Oh, I made a mistake. See, I called this connection, but that's not what our connection object is called outside of our functions. Our connection object is called my connection. So I better make sure I change that. Otherwise, this will not work. So we'll change that to my connection. Okay, so let's test this out now. I'm going to run my server. I'll run my server, and I'll run a few instances of the client. All right, there's my first client. Here's my second client. And let's see if we can do some admin functionality now. We're not doing the fun admin stuff. We're doing, I think, maybe the boring stuff. We're just sending messages. But eventually we'll be able to kick and ban, and that will be kind of fun. So we'll start our server. All right, perfect. Let's get some new names. We'll do Mary 192.168.1.7 at 12345. Let's do yellow. And then let's do Jill at 192.168.1.7 and port number 12345. And we will do, let's see what green looks like here. Okay, perfect. So these folks can type back and forth. There's Mary, there's Jill. Awesome. And so now let's, on the admin side, let's actually send a broadcast message. Warning, closing in 5 minutes. So we'll broadcast that to everybody. And if you look, that came through admin. It says broadcast warning closing in 5 minutes. Both of those got it. Let's now send a private message to one of our people here. So we'll say, Mary, talk to me tonight, tonight. Yeah, whatever, fine. So I got to make sure that I select. So if I just click private message right now, no one is selected. But if I select Mary from this list, now when I hit private message, PM, Mary should have gotten that message. And she did not. So we got to figure out what has happened here. If I select Jill and I hit click PM, Jill's not getting that private message either. So let's debug this, right? Let's debug it. Sometimes we get mistakes and we got to debug it in real time. So I'm going to come over here. I'm just going to pause the video and we'll figure out what has happened. Okay, and very quickly I saw what happened. All we had to do was come over here and look at the output in the terminal. On my server's output, I have an error here. It says error on line 176, light color is not defined. So I tried to pass a color as light color on the server. Of course, light color is not defined. It is because we reference our server's color as light green. Light green. So let me come over to the server. Line 176, where I was creating a message packet here. Instead of light color, this should read light green, right? Light green. That's what I think we defined as one of our colors. Yeah, light green. Okay, so let's just try this one last time. Sorry about that mistake. Let me stop all of these processes. I'll run the server. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. I'll run some clients. Run and run. All right. Server's up and running. Let's connect our clients. Jack at 192.168.1.7, port 12345. We'll do orange. And Jill, 192.168.1.7. We'll use the default color white here this time. Connect. Jack can talk. Jill can talk. Perfect. I can send something to everybody as the admin. Wonderful. Now I'll also say, hey, Jack. And I'll private message Jack. And we can see that only Jack was selected here. Jill did not get that message. And it says the admin. It says here private. So that's really nice. If I select Jill from this list, hey, Jill, what's up? And I'll private message. That only goes to Jill. All right, so really great. So this is working out really nicely in terms of our ability to select clients from our list box and then access their client socket and just send something directly to them. This is going to help us out a lot because when we kick a client or ban a client, we only want to kick or ban a specific client, right? So this is going to help us as we finish up working on some of our admin functionality. So let's find that disconnect method. So here it is, right below our connect method. So here's right at the top, we had connect, and now here's our disconnect method. So here, the client is deciding that they want to disconnect from the server. So what we'll do is we'll create a message packet with a disconnect flag. And the message that we're going to send really isn't important as it won't be used. But what we'll do is we'll take this packet, we'll turn it into a JSON, and then we'll send it over to the server to be processed. So we'll say create a message packet to be sent. And so we'll say message packet. We'll call our function create message that is going to do that work for us. We'll pass a disconnect flag. We'll pass our name, so connection.name. We can get that through our connection. The message doesn't really matter, so we're not going to use it. So you can really put whatever you want in here. I'll just say I am leaving. And then we'll pass in our color through our connection object. So connection.color. All right, perfect. So now that we have our message packet created, let's turn it into a JSON so we can encode it and send it through our data stream. So message underscore JSON is equal to json.dumps, and in here we'll put message packet. All right, and then now that we have that JSON, we can send it through our socket. We'll access that socket through our connection object. So connection dot client socket dot send. And what are we going to send? We're going to send our message JSON. But we have to encode this first. So dot encode, and our encoder will access through our connection object. So connection dot encoder. Awesome. I think that looks great. While we're here, what we'll say is since we're disconnecting our server, we're initiating the disconnect here. Why don't we also we'll disable our GUI for chat. So we'll take all of our buttons and undo them. So disable GUI for chat. And so to do that, I think we have a function. It's called GUI end, and let's go write this function right now. So let's find GUI end. See, here's GUI start, and here's GUI end. So I'm going to actually just copy my GUI start function, copy, and I'll paste it in here. And all I really have to do is wherever I have the word disabled, I'm going to put normal. So I'm holding Alt and clicking to have multiple cursors. So I'm going to get disabled, and I'll put normal. And then wherever it was normal, I will add disabled instead. Oh, it didn't stick. Disabled. So I got to do that twice. All right, so now our GUI should change when we want to disconnect. So all of the buttons and entries that were disabled will become enabled so we could rejoin or join a new chat. The last thing that we're going to have to do is we have to link this disconnect function to our disconnect button. So let's go do that right now. So I'll scroll all the way down. I'll find my disconnect button. Where is it? Connect button. Here is my disconnect button on our info frame layout. And I'm going to scroll over here. You can see we're already linked to the disconnect function from our last example that we did, but now we got to change this to use a lambda. So we'll say lambda colon, and then we'll call the disconnect function, and we'll pass in here now using the lambda. We can pass in an argument. So we'll pass in the my connection object so that we can make changes to the connection. Okay, awesome. So when we hit our disconnect button, what we'll now do is we're going to send a disconnect flag to the server. And so now on the server end, we got to figure out how to process this disconnect flag. So I'm going to save my client, and let's head over to our server. All right, so on the server side, let's head into our process message function. So we'll scroll down. Here is process message, and inside here we've already talked about what we're going to do if the flag is an info flag, what we're going to do if the flag is a message flag, and now we'll handle what we're going to do if the flag is a disconnect flag. So in here, what we want to do is we are going to officially close and remove the client socket that is disconnecting from all of the associated lists. Okay, so what we're going to have to first get is the index of this client socket. And so if you look in the process message function, we have access to the client socket that has sent this message. So we know which client socket we want to close and remove from the lists. But what we have to do is we have to actually get the index of that client socket in our connection client sockets list. Because once we have that index, if this is at index 2, then the IP of index, the index 2 here is the IP for this socket. And if we go to like our list box where we have our clients being listed, the item index 2 would be that client. So once we have the index, we're going to be able to remove everything perfectly. So we got to get that index first. So we'll put a comment here. We'll say close/remove client socket. And so we're going to grab the index. So we'll say index is equal to. So we have a list and we know the element. We just want the index of that element. So we'll call connection, our connection object, to get our client sockets list. And then we'll call the .index method. And in here you have to pass the element that you want the index of. Well, we want the index of client socket, whatever that client socket was that was passed into this function. All right, so now that we have that index, let's use it to remove a bunch of things. So first, we'll remove it from the client's socket list. So we'll say connection.client_sockets.remove, and we'll remove using the actual client socket itself. So when you know the element, you can just type the element in here and call the remove method, and it will remove it from the list. But if we look at something like connection dot client IPs, here we don't know the actual IP address, so we can't call .remove. But what we can use is the .pop method, and the pop method will remove something from a list, and you can specify the index that you want to remove. So we want to remove the element that is at this index, whichever one we found right here. And then lastly, let's clear out our list box. So we'll say client list box. So that is our list box element. I'm just going to cut that really quick. If we run this, I'll show you where it is. It's going to be the list of clients that we're down here in our list box. That's client list box. We want to remove it from that. So we can say client list box dot delete, and we have to specify the index, which item in this list box. Well, we've got index for us, and that's going to take care of it. So getting this index in this list really helps us out quite a bit. Now that we've removed everything, let's close the client socket. So we'll say client socket dot close. Awesome. So now that that's done, why don't we alert all users that the given client has left? So we'll create a message and we'll broadcast that message. So alert all users that the client has left the chat. All right, so we'll say message packet is equal to create message. We'll call our create message function. This is going to be a message flag. It's going to be from the admin, and it'll be a broadcast. And what do we want? Oh, I think I got mixed up right there. There we go, that's better. Now, what do we want this message to say? Maybe we'll say something like, we'll use an F string here. We'll get the name of the person that sent the message, the disconnect flag. So name has left the server, ... Perfect. And then we'll pass in a color. We'll use our default light green color. So there is our message packet. So now let's turn it into a JSON, a string, so we can encode it. So message underscore JSON is equal to JSON.dumps, and we'll pass in our message packet. And now let's broadcast that message to every single connected client. So everyone knows that the certain person has been disconnected. So broadcast message, we'll call our broadcast message function, which I believe, what does that take in? Broadcast message, you just got to find it. Self-broadcast. Broadcast message takes in a connection, and it takes in a message JSON. And if you remember, we have written this so that anytime we call this, the JSONs have to be encoded. All right, so they have to be encoded. So right here, here we are back in our process message function. We'll pass in our connection object, and we'll pass in our message underscore JSON dot encode, and we'll call connection dot encoder to encode it. All right, so that looks pretty great. So that'll update everybody else's chat, but let's also update the server's like chat history. So we'll say update the server UI, and so let's update that. So that list box is going to be our history list box. That's where we're keeping track of our history, our chat history. So we'll say history list box dot insert. We're going to add an element to this at index 0. And we'll say, we'll add an F string, we'll just say admin. We'll mimic the message we just sent to everybody else. So we'll say admin broadcast, colon, and then we'll say name has left the server, ... All right, so I think that's going to help us out quite well there. All right, so I think let's test this out. We should be able to disconnect and have someone leave the server. So let's see. We'll run this. I'll just start this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. We'll run a client. Okay, Mike 192.168.1.7. All right, connect. We're typing, doing some stuff. That should be coming through on the server history. It is. And if I disconnect, all right, it says we've disconnected, so the disconnect worked, but it looks like we did not accurately update any of our information here. So let's just see. Do we have any error messages here? So I got an error message. It says Main thread is not in loop. A connection has been closed. Goodbye. All right, so I'm going to pause this and we will try to just debug this, and I'll be back shortly. Okay, so I figured out what the error is. It took me way too long to debug that. You might see it. You might have seen it. So right here, if we look, we said we had to get the index of the client socket from our list client sockets from our connection object, and then we're going to use that to like delete everything, right? And so on this line right here is my error. I'm using the remove method, which doesn't remove an element at a specific index. It removes a specific element from the list. You have to specify the element. I have the word client here, so that was my mistake. That should be client socket. So we'll remove the client socket from that list. So now let's test this. If I run this, we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll start that. We'll come over here. We'll run our client. I'll just do a test name. All right, 192.168.1.7 is my local IP. We'll connect. So if I start putting some information in here, okay, and then when I disconnect, we'll say end server. Oh, that's my server. What am I doing? I'm over here for my client. Sorry, I got confused. So let's end the connection here on the client side. There we go. So there's our disconnect, and you can see that we now have that information up here, and we have been removed from our list box. So that's working really good. It just took a really long time for me to figure out what was going wrong there. So sorry about that. So now this is initializing closing the socket on the client side, right? We just hit this disconnect button. So now let's talk about initializing closing the socket from the server side, whether the server wants to end the server, kick a client, or ban a client. So what we're going to do here is we'll have the server send a disconnect flag to the client, and whenever a client receives a disconnect flag, we will automatically force them to send the disconnect flag back to the server, which will automatically close our connection for us. So let's see how we might implement this a little bit. So we'll come over to our server here. So here is our server, and let's head to our kick client function. So if I scroll down, we've got our kick client and our ban client. So these are two ways that we're going to get rid of clients from the server end. So for our kick client, well, we'll remove pass here. We are going to select a client from our list box, right? So we'll have a list and we can click which one we want, and then we'll choose to kick them. So we've already discussed how we select a client from our list box when we've used our private message function. And so we're really going to do the exact same thing here. So I'll say select a client from the list box, and so we'll say index, we'll get the index, and we'll say client list box, that's our list box name, dot, and then you use the cur selection method. And here, if you specify index 0, the first element that this will return is the index of the element that you have selected in that list box. So now that I have that index, I'm going to get my client socket. So client socket. And where are we going to get the client socket from? Well, our connection object has a list of all of the current connected client sockets. So we'll say connection.client sockets. There's our list, and we'll get the client socket that is at index. Perfect. So now that we have that client socket, what we will do is we will send a message packet with a disconnect flag that will essentially eventually force the client to kick themselves out. So we'll say create the message packet. So message underscore packet is equal to create message. And we're going to send a disconnect flag. That's crucial here from the admin, and it's a private message. And we'll say you have been kicked, dot, dot, dot. And then we'll pass our color light green here from the admin side. Now we'll turn that packet into a JSON. So we'll say message JSON is equal to json.dumps message underscore packet. And let's send it directly to this one client. So client socket.send message underscore JSON dot encode, and we'll get the encoder through our connection object. So connection.encoder. All right, so I think that's our kick client. We will have to link this to our button, the kick button, but we'll do that in a moment. Why don't we work on writing the ban client function while we're right here? So we'll scroll down, and here's our ban client function. So here it's going to be almost identical to the kick client function, except we'll send a different message, and we have to then ban the IP of the client. So what we'll do is I'm just going to copy and paste our kick client function. So I'll copy this whole thing, copy, I'll paste it. All right, so this looks good. So we're going to get the index of the item that we have selected from our list box. We're going to find the client socket that is associated with that index. We'll create a disconnect packet. And here I'll say, instead of you have been kicked, I'll say you have been banned. All right, and we'll send that along. And now what we need to do is we have to actually ban the IP address. So we'll say ban the IP address of the client. So how are we going to do that? Well, if you recall, I'm going to scroll all the way up to our connection class. The connection class has a list of banned IPs. And when we create an instance of this connection class, it's empty. And then when we run our connect client, if we look, anytime someone tries to connect to our server and we accept the connection, we check to see if the IP address, and that's going to be, the IP address is going to be the first element in our client address that we grab here. We check to see if it's in the banned IPs, and if it is, what are we doing? We're sending a disconnect flag, see? So, and it says you have been banned, goodbye. So they're not going to be able to get back in here. So all you have to do is just add that IP address to our list of banned IP addresses. So we'll say, we'll get that list through our connection object, connection.banned IPs dot append, we'll append to it, and now we want to get this client's IP address. So we have a list of all of our IP addresses through the connection object. So we'll say connection dot client underscore IPs, and we want the IP that is at our value index. All right, so that should ban everything quite nicely here. All right, so we got our kick function, kick client and ban client. Let's just go link these to our buttons correctly. So let's scroll down. Here's my kick button and my ban button. If I scroll over, we have nothing present. So our first one is our kick button. So I'm going to say command is equal to lambda kick. What do you call it? Kick client? Yeah, we call it kick client. And we'll pass in our connection object, my connection. And then we'll do something similar to our ban button. So there's our ban button, and we just have to link that. So we'll say command is equal to, we need the lambda in order to link our function with an argument. So we'll say lambda ban client, and we'll pass in my underscore connection. Okay, so this is perfect. So I'm going to save my server here. I think my server looks pretty great. So now our server is going to be able to send disconnect flags, whether it's through kicking or banning. So we have to head back to the client to process the disconnect flag. So now the client, so here we are on our client. If we go to our process message here, we've processed our info flags, we've processed our message flags, but we have not yet talked about what to do when we get a disconnect flag. So essentially what we're going to do here is we've said that anytime we get a disconnect flag, we are just simply going to force the client to send their own disconnect flag to the server. Like we're automatically going to start to disconnect here. So let's see how we're going to do that. So let's get rid of pass. We'll just put a little comment here. We'll say server is asking you to leave. So let's first display the message that came in from the server, right? Even though it has a disconnect flag, it might say something like you have been kicked or you have been banned. So let's display it. So we'll say my list box. That's our list box over here on the client side. Dot insert, and we'll insert at index 0. I'll use an F string here. We'll put the name, whoever sent the message. So in our case, it's probably going to be like admin private. And then we'll put the message. So it'll say like you have been kicked, you have been banned, goodbye. Let's update the color. So we'll say my list box dot item config. What item do we want to config? Well, the item at index 0, the one we just put in there, and what color do we want to config? So we'll set the foreground to whatever the color is that we grabbed when we unpacked our message, right? So remember, here we are, we're unpacking our message, so we have all of our variables right here, and color will be the color that came in on our message packet. Okay, and now what we'll do is we want to send a disconnect flag back to the server, and we want to start the disconnect process here. We want to force it, so I'm just going to call my disconnect function. So we'll say disconnect, and we'll pass in our connection object. And that should do it here, right? So let's go. When we call disconnect, we're going to then create a message packet with a disconnect that says I am leaving, send it to the server. We're going to disable our GUI, and then, so I'll save this, and when the server gets that disconnect flag, then they are going to finish everything up, right? So when the server gets the disconnect flag, they're going to remove that client from everything. They're going to alert all of the other users, and they'll close that socket. So I think that this is going to work fantastic. I think there's just one last thing that we have to handle, and what if the admin decides it's time to end the server themselves, right? We have an end server button here on the admin side. So when we do that, we have to send a disconnect flag to each and every client, essentially forcing them out. And then we can just update the server UI so that like all of our buttons are essentially like disabled. So I'm going to scroll up here on my server. We have one last function. It is our end server function. So on our end server, we want to create a disconnect flag, I think for everybody. Okay, so let's see how we are going to do that. So we'll create a message packet. So I'll say message, well, actually I'll put a comment here. I'll say alert all users that the server is closing. So we'll create a message packet. Message packet is equal to create message, and we'll use a flag, disconnect. Make sure you spell your flags correctly. That would be bad if you didn't. The user here will be admin, but we'll set it to be a broadcast admin, so everybody will know that they're all getting this message. And then what do I want the message to say? I'll say something like server is closing. All right, so server is closing, and then I'll use my color light green. All right, so there is the message packet that is going to begin to close out the connection for all of our clients. We'll turn it into a JSON, so message underscore JSON is equal to JSON.dumps message underscore packet. And then I am going to broadcast this to every single client. So I'll call the broadcast message function that we wrote, and in here I need my connection object, and then I need the message JSON, message underscore JSON, and remember we are going to encode it before we send it to broadcast. So .encode, and we'll get our encoder through our connection object, connection.encoder. All right, and then so that will, when I end the server, I'm going to send this disconnect flag to all of the clients. We're going to broadcast it, and then they will all send me a disconnect flag back, and it will shut down each and every thread that we're running. So lastly, let's just update the GUI here on the server end. So we'll say update GUI. And I think I have, yeah, if we just scroll up a little bit where we started the server, I've got a whole update GUI thing here. I'm just going to copy this. I will paste it here, and that should be pretty good. I'm not going to do this history list box.delete 0 to end because we'll do that later. I'm not going to clear out. I want the chat history to remain open until I start another server. But here we'll put a message in, and I'll just say, so this says server started. I'll say server closing on port, and then wherever this says normal, I'll make it say disabled. All right, so again, I'm holding, was it Alt? Yeah, I got to hold Alt to get the multiple cursors. All right, so I'll delete all of those and put disabled. And then right down here, the last thing that I'll do is I'll just make the start button active again. So I'll make that normal. Okay, and then we'll just simply close the server socket. So now everything at this point, right? Everything, all we've sent the disconnect flag to all of the clients. The clients will be forced to send a disconnect flag back to us, which means we have shut them all down. We have closed those threads. So at this point, everything should be done. So now we can close the server socket. And right here, we'll just say we'll access that through our connection object, server socket.close. Okay, the last thing that we have to do, though, is we just have to link this function and server to our button. And then I think we are officially finished. So if I scroll all the way down, let's find that button. Here it is under my connection frame layout. I have my end button. We are going to link this. So we'll say command is equal to lambda colon end server, and we'll pass in the my connection object. All right, I think this looks pretty good. Let me just look really quick. Formatting, I'm pretty happy with everything. What we will do is I'm going to save it here, and I think this is a good place to stop. And then in the next video, we'll run some official tests on this, where we run it locally on my machine, and then I also will upload the client to a couple other computers that I have on my own home network, and we'll see if it works that way. So I'll run my server here locally on my machine, and I'll also run a couple of clients. So we'll run a couple of clients here. One. We'll run another one here too. So we'll have two clients right here on my computer. Okay, so I'm going to minimize that. We'll just move these around. All right, perfect. So I'm going to start up my server on port 12345, and so this is going to be running on my local machine here with an IP address of 192.168.1.7. And so then we'll put a couple of clients. We'll do Mike. We'll connect to 192.168.1.7 at port 12345, and Mike will choose. We'll do a color. We'll do blue here. And so if I connect, we can see Mike has joined the server, and that IP address is being registered here on the server. Awesome. So let's do another one. We'll do Bob, 192.168.1.7 at port 12345. We'll do purple here, and we'll connect. And so Bob has joined, and so we're getting some nice verification here. Now, I've also put this client script on some other computers of mine. Now, you may have to change some of your firewall settings if you want to run your client on another computer. So if you try this right now and it doesn't work for you, I'm going to do my best to address this issue in an upcoming video. But for now, let's just try to connect to our server from another computer, which would be at a different IP address. So I'm going to connect right now with a computer, user Mary. And so you can see Mary's popped up right here, and she does in fact have her own IP address, 192.168.1.78, and we're getting verification here on both clients that Mary has joined the server. And I'm going to connect with another computer I have here, and that's Jill. And so Jill has popped in right here, and again, we're at another IP address of 192.168.1.77. So this is working really nicely across my local network. So let's check to see if some of the functionality works. So we'll say, hey everyone. We'll send that. Chat history is working. We got the color we want. We'll have Bob say something. Hey, Mike, this is cool. And send it. All right, Bob's working. We'll have some of my other computers send something in. Anyone want to eat lunch soon? Question. We'll send it in. All right, so there's Jill. Perfect. And then let's have Mary say something just to make sure we're all working. I will. Let's get pizza, because everybody loves pizza, and we'll send that in. So perfect. Our chat functionality is working really nicely, and it's showing up over here. So now let's test some of our other features here. So we know, like, if we disconnect, so for example, maybe I'll have Jill disconnect for right now. We'll see a message being broadcast to everyone. So Jill's going to disconnect. All right, Jill disconnected. It says Jill left the server. We're getting that. We're getting that in the chat history as well, and Jill is gone. Jill can reconnect, so we'll reconnect, and Jill is back in. So that's working quite nicely. Now let's test some of our admin functionality. So we should be able to broadcast a message to everybody in the chat. So I'll just broadcast. I'll say, I am the admin. You all behave. All right, behave. So we'll send that, and it looks like everybody's got that. So Mike's got it, Bob's got it, and my other two computers, I also see that message appearing. But we should then be able to private message an individual client. So let's select Mike from our list, and I'll say, hey, Mike, you are cool, and we'll private message him. And so you can see Mike got that message right here. However, Bob and my other clients did not receive that message. If I select a different user from the list, Bob, you are cooler than Mike, and I can send it to Bob, and you can see Mike did not get that message, but Bob did, and it's from the admin with a private tag here. So that's working awesome. Now let's try to kick some users. So I will maybe select, we'll kick Bob. So I have Bob selected, so I'm going to kick Bob. So if I click my kick button, I should see Bob being out of the chat. So when I click that, Bob has disappeared. It says Bob has left the server. And if we look over at Bob's history, it says you have been kicked, and then the connection has been closed. Goodbye. But Bob's been kicked. He should be able to connect back in. So if we try to reconnect with Bob, we have no issue. So Bob is back in at that IP address of 192.168.1.77. Awesome. So this is working really pretty good. Let's see if we can maybe ban some IP addresses. So I'm going to try to ban, let's just say Jill says something inappropriate, like programming is stupid. So Jill's going to send that message, and that's highly inappropriate, right? So we're going to come over here on our admin window. We'll select Jill, and we'll click ban here. So I'm going to ban Jill. Jill has been kicked from the server, and so now on my computer that I have running, which was the IP address 192.168.1.77, I'm going to try to reconnect. So I'm going to connect right now. And so right now I've connected, but it says you have been banned. Goodbye. So the banned IP address is working really nicely. And so maybe I can show it here. I'll ban Mike. So I'm going to ban Mike. So we'll ban Mike. Mike, it says you have been banned. The connection has been closed. Goodbye. So if I hit connect again, I can't get back in. It says you have been banned. All right. And so what else happened here? Well, I think, can Bob still work? Because they're at the same IP address. So Bob still works. But if Bob disconnects right now when Bob tries to connect, is Bob going to be banned? It's a great question. And the answer is yes, he will be banned. Because if you look, Mike and Bob, they both have the same IP address because these guys right now are running on my local machine. So remember, we're just banning by IP addresses. We're not banning by usernames, etc. So I think this is working really well. I'm going to maybe end the server, and hopefully we'll see, Mary gets kicked out. So Mary's gone. We ended the server, and everything is working absolutely perfect. We've built a chat room application that has both client and server GUIs, with the server side essentially serving as an administrator for the chat room. So you could deploy this essentially on like all of your computers in your house, your school, or your office, and really let people chat with one another, which I think is super cool. Now you're probably asking yourself, okay, so this works locally within a network, but can it work across networks? Could I give this to my friend, and can we chat from one house to another? And the answer is, right now, no, because your router is most likely getting in the way. Good news, though, this is a relatively easy fix, although it's most likely going to be different for every single router. So in our next set of videos, we'll begin talking about how we can expose our server to the global world, and maybe some of the potential risks of doing so and why you might want to or might not want to do it. But we'll eventually getting you so that you can talk to people on other networks, like your friends or your family in different houses, different cities, different states, etc. So I can't wait to open this up in our next video, and I will see you then.